Welcome to the Nailed It Wall.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Nailed It Wall. We have Rachael Mann on, author of Spaces You'll Go and Martian Classroom. You're going to hear about some public speaking, which works out well. We're on a podcast.
That's right.
I'm pumped up for this. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 53. I'm Mr. Lane, the STEM guy.
And I'm Mrs. Scofield.
And I am Rachael Mann.
All right, we are pumped. We are pumped to have you on. You were just talking before we got on the podcast of how many people are excited to have her on. And
I know you're a celebrity, not just in a small realm, but there's a lot of big people that speak very highly of you. So cool. We feel incredibly honored.
Especially on Labor Day weekend, taking some time. You said it's just another weekend. You know, it's a weekend where we have a Monday off, but we appreciate you taking the time on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and thank you. And I'm humbled and honored for the accolades, but thank you very much.
As we start every episode, we start off with our Nailed It. How'd you nail it this week, partner?
Well, I have to say, you know, when we first started back to school, one of the biggest things I was worried about as an 8th grade teacher was how do you make sure that you have built a sense of community virtually, and how do you get the kids to show up and teach in a way that's kind of similar to hands-on, but without the ability of teaching hands-on. And so I will say that this past week, you know, where the kids are, we just entered September, and I'm feeling like things are going well. You know, my kids show up, they participate, you know, utilize breakout rooms and things like that. And they're talking, and their projects that they've been turning in have been truly just mind blowing. And what's cool is I'll give a project, but then they'll want to take it in a direction that's like 10 times more complex and more interesting than even what I had envisioned. And I'm just really, really amazed by the buy-in and how close the kids have become in a virtual classroom. So I'm pretty pumped about that, actually.
I love it. I love it. You're doing a great job building that sense of community. And it's, you know, we're going the second week of September of this virtual learning environment.
Crazy.
We're surviving, you know, we're getting, I always tell the kids, I'm like, we're 1 week closer to being back at school. And then the kids are on Zoom. They're like, what? We're going back to school next week? I'm like, no, I did not say that. What's your nailed it this past week, Rachael?
You know, I did my first keynote that was to only 2 people. There's a conference in New Mexico that is now going to be virtual on September 15th. And they decided to have a videographer record it in advance. And so that was interesting to put yourself in the shoes that you're in the future actually talking to people, because they're going to be hearing this and listening in. But, you know, at the moment you're talking to your videographer and his assistant. So that was actually pretty exciting. And it was, you know, a little out of my comfort zone, but it went well. And it was just such a great experience and nice to see people face to face.
Yeah, well, that's got to be a really weird thing as a keynote speaker, though, because you would vibe off the energy of your audience and like kind of, you know, you're kind of playing off of that. And, you know, I'm sure that's got to be a really weird missing component, much like I think like athletes playing in front of, you know, empty stands, but it's got to be, you know, kind of a mental shift that you would have to do for that.
Oh, big time. And fortunately, the videographer and his assistant, they were very expressive, and I so appreciated that I could at least feed off their energy, because that makes a big difference. Even in a virtual keynote, virtual environment, you're able to see the faces of the participants. So it was interesting, but I was excited that it all turned out well and wasn't as difficult as I expected.
Now, where do you stand on virtual PD versus being there in person? Like, what has that shift been like for you?
You know, okay, so I have 2 different sides to it. One is that I didn't realize how much I liked being home. And, you know, when everything started getting canceled, and I was just like, wow, my schedule just cleared quickly. And I really enjoyed and embraced the extra time that I've had from not spending nights in hotels or in airports and that side of it. But I miss the in-person connection. It's just I think that people have done a great job shifting to virtual. but there's just so many different elements that are missing to it that you can't replace. So super excited for when we're able to get back to in-person events again.
Yeah, that's so cool to kind of hear that. Like so many people are kind of divided and be like, I love virtual PD. It's just like, it's there. But then so many people are like, I just love being in person. I love the travel. Like, it's just like who I am now. It's like you kind of get in that mindset of you got your favorite cities that you get to go with, favorite organizations that you work with. And it's just, we've all had to adapt in a certain way. And, we want to get back to that point. And me and you are so bummed I.C.C's gone virtual, it breaks our heart.
I know, because we were excited to go there kind of thing. And then just be like an experience. That's the thing about, I think PD is going to be different. It'll be accessible on a much higher level. It's so much more accessible. And you guys can be in places, like so many more places, because, you don't have to travel and have that time constraints. However, like the networking part of it, the experience part of it, being together, that's different. So, there's something gained, there's something lost. It just looks different.
Well, and with that, I think it's going to be interesting to see how we change as a society. Like, at what point will people actually feel comfortable being in a room with a lot of other people, or, handshakes? Will we ever get back to shaking hands again, or hugs, all these different things? So, yeah, it'll be, the hindsight is 2020 has new meaning, but it'll have even more meaning when we're looking back hindsight at 2020.
Well played.
True, yeah. So very true. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Well, mine nailed it this week. We run the announcements for our school, and we do a great job just like engaging our community and keeping everyone pumped up. And a couple of weeks ago, we had our new assistant principal on, and we live in Glendale, Arizona. And I was talking about, I went for a run, and I was like, you wouldn't believe it. I saw a raccoon, and the two of you looked at me like I had two heads. You didn't believe that there's raccoons here in the valley. And then the other night, I went for another run, and I saw one come run by. I just took on my phone as I'm running, tried to take a picture, and then all of a sudden, it got away. And I put my phone away. Then like 7 more raccoons came running across there. But the fun part is, how we engage our students. We started this segment. We're like, we're going to put you on the beat. What do we call it? SV Viper.
Yeah, like I think that's what it was.
Something
SV
that,
Viper
yeah, and we're like, you're going to get out there. You're going to capture these, capture a picture of these, and you're like, don't capture them, just capture a picture. And our kids were just so excited, and so many parents were on our Facebook page, being like, we love these announcements, and we've seen them, and it's just so cool. And like you thought it was a myth, like Bigfoot, that there's actually raccoons.
It does feel a lot like a Loch Ness kind of Bigfoot vibe. These stories, it's like the big fish story. However, there has been a lot of confirmation that perhaps he is legitimate in this. And that's what my favorite thing is the excitement and the community around that. And like from little kids up to, the parents. And then you have like our people that, our maintenance crew, one of the women was like, oh my gosh, there was one on our campus. She takes a picture and posts it. I just love that it brings people together, conversations.
Well, and I actually used to live behind Mountain Ridge High School in Glendale.
That's where we are. That's where we are. We're right there.
Okay. I would see a raccoon. My dogs would see it first usually, but there was a huge raccoon that we would see from time to time. So I can vouch for you on that one.
I like it. I appreciate it, Rachel. I needed you last week. But we have our Sierra Verde Vipers there, and it's so cool that you have your daughters at Mountain Ridge right now. We have that connection. We're a feeder school right into Mountain Ridge, and small world in this virtual environment. Now, with all that being said, tell us a little about your career as an educator, and kind of what got you into education, and where it's led you today.
I'll be honest, I hated school. I was a very shy student, and I would do anything to get out of going to school. And, I was a good student. I would make great grades, but there would be semesters where I would miss like 17, 18 days of school. And so it was something where I wanted to become an educator to try to flip that around, to be able to reach those kids that felt what I felt. And so I think that was something that really kept me in education. There were moments when I almost dropped out of my teacher prep program. I hated speaking in front of people. That was something that I was so shy. And so I had some close moments even during my student teaching. And then uh, there was a shooting that happened in 1999, and I'm trying to remember the name of which one it was, but it was something that just seeing how it impacted all of us, it really, I switched my lesson plans to teach the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. Sean Covey was Stephen Covey's son. And it was just seeing the connections and the value, like being, just how much I cared about those students and the impact that you can make as an educator. And even my first year teaching, something that college could have never prepared me for a moment where a student fell out of her desk. There was a letter on the desk. She had decided to commit suicide. And so, we called in the paramedics, they were able to save her. And I just remember a letter that she wrote to me at the end of that year, and how that my family and consumer sciences class was what made her continue on. Well, and also the way that I just embraced her and helped her through that. And it was just that so many powerful stories about how a teacher can really transform someone's life. So that's been something that, even though I'm not in a classroom now, being able to work with educators and being able to sometimes be that lifeline. There's a teacher who we talk back and forth through Instagram all the time, and right now she's struggling with this virtual learning, and just being able to be a lifeline for folks. That's powerful.
Wow. I mean,
I have
we're
chills.
we're
Yeah.
off to a good start here.
I know.
Now you talk about, you talk about like you as an educator, and even like someone that, wasn't a fan of school growing up, and even in like, in college, there's times where you want to kind of throw in the towel. Is there that one teacher that kind of sticks out to you that kind of shaped like who you became as an educator?
My mother, she was a teacher. She's retired now, but she was a teacher and then a school improvement coach. And so I was able to go to her as a teacher, anytime I had a situation that I wasn't sure how to handle. She was that mentor that I would call her up. She would talk me through it. And even when I first moved to Arizona in 2009, and I was teaching 6th grade science. And, got here, there weren't any CT positions available. So I was teaching 6th grade science, and I started in the middle of the year. And I would every day call my mom at the end of the day and be like, Mom, I'm just struggling. And I remember her asking me, she was just like, Rachel, how often do you smile at your students? And I remember my response. I said, Mom, if you knew these kids, there's nothing to smile about. That's my confession right now. And so she told me, she said, I want you to go. I don't care if the kids learn anything this week. I want you to smile at every student every day at the beginning of class, meeting them at the door and smiling at them. And I realized that I was the problem. I was the kids, everything turned around within a week, and we started learning. And it was amazing how something so simple just really transformed the classroom. And, it's hard going in the middle of a school year and taking over a class that's had substitute after substitute, but, it really did transform the classroom.
Wow, that is crazy. And like 6th grade's that's a tough age, to step into, and but it's all about the connection, and when kids know that you're not invested in them, then they will not learn. They just won't do it.
Oh, absolutely. And it was a huge transition going from high school to 6th grade. But I fell in love with it. I mean, by the end of the school year, it was just, tears when we're saying goodbye to each other. So yeah, it was quite the growth experience for me.
And where did you move from?
I taught in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC, for most of my teaching career.
Okay.
Now, what do you love about the CTE of being an educator?
Yeah. So with career and technical education, a lot of times you get to have the same students year after year, which means even deeper relationships. So I had students when I was teaching in Tucson for Pima JTED, who I had them from 9th grade and got to watch them graduate and still staying in touch. But everything, just like in your world, it's so hands-on, and you're working side by side with these students, doing catering events, getting up early in the morning to do breakfast snack bars, going on field trips together, watching them win awards and scholarships through their student organization. It was FCCLA for us. And that's just something that I think that CTE educators are fortunate to really be able to build those relationships and to know that you're preparing kids. Every teacher is preparing kids for a career, but it's such a specific career path. And sometimes it's as much about helping those kids learn what they don't want to do. I had a girl who was just so talented in culinary, and she came to me her senior year and she said, Miss, you're probably going to be upset at what I'm going to tell you, but I've decided not to go into culinary. I want to be an early childhood education teacher. And I'm like, yes, we need more teachers. I'm like, that's fantastic. You'll use the skills that you learned in my culinary class for the rest of your life. But culinary can be a really tough world too. So, it's exciting to see them make those choices and get to actually experiment with and learn what they want to do through your program.
Well, and you don't have to explain to them the practical applications of what you're trying to teach them. They see that like immediately, that's what they're doing in their day to day, which is such a great opportunity as an educator to have that connection. I'm doing cell division this past week, and that's a tougher cell, right?
Well played.
Yeah, thank you. And so it's interesting because you're giving them life skills, and it's not just like you said, it's not just the topic that you're teaching them, but it's the confidence to go out there. It's the understanding how to interact with other people and all of that, which is such a cool opportunity as an educator.
Now, we were doing some research on you, and there was a time that you actually called in sick because you did not want to speak in front of teachers. Can you share that story with us?
Yes. So I've had people ask me about public speaking and have mentioned how it's so hard for them to stand up in front of a group and speak. And I'm like, oh, trust me, I get it. I was asked to do a training for a large group of teachers, and I prepared for it like crazy and was so nervous all night long. I was literally sick because I was so nervous about doing that training the next day. And I ended up calling in sick. And it was just that moment of feeling disappointed in myself and realizing, I've got to wrap my head around this. And it was something where I just started saying yes. Anytime someone asked me to speak, I realized I've got to say yes to it. And then when I got to the Arizona Department of Ed, I was put in charge of the Ed Rising program as the state director, and had to train high school students how to speak in public. And that was a great opportunity to really hone my craft while I'm working with them to help them develop their skills and to do more than just reading a speech, just to be able to really learn how to connect with an audience.
There's not a lot of people that specifically shift their career path in order to do the thing that they're most terrified to do. That's a pretty unique position for you to be in, to say, I'm terrified of public speaking, so I'm going to make my whole life's work surrounding that to, not only get past it yourself, but then help other kids break that barrier. I was super painfully shy when I was growing up, and I had those same terrifying fears. And for me, when I have eighth graders that don't want to stand in front of the class or those kinds of things, I'm like, I totally get this. I get it, but you'll get through it. But to be able to face those fears and to put yourself out there and make yourself just kind of go through this evolution is really amazing. I admire that in you greatly.
Oh, well, thank you. And, I have to mention, you may have heard of Jamie Cassip. He was the Google evangelist. Yeah. Well, we're friends, and I went to him and asked him to do a keynote for an event, and he wasn't available. And I said, do you know someone else who might be able to do it? And he said, yeah, you. And that was something that I'm like, I'm not a keynote speaker. And he said, well, why not? And it planted that seed. And soon after that, someone asked me to be a keynote speaker at their event. So it was interesting to see how it all unfolded, and someone literally just planting a seed there that I'd never even considered that as an option until he said that.
Well, I think Jamie's the master of that. So much we had Colin on a couple of weeks ago, and he was sitting down talking with Jamie, and Jamie's like, everyone wants to get a job at Google. That's what everyone wants. don't work at Google, start your own Google, it's like, go from there, and just like that's just who he is. And just like, just such, someone that's so amazing. Now, what's your role with NAU? Is that where you kind of like work with like teachers and kind of support?
Yeah, so I was only with NAU for a year, and it was through the Arizona K-12 Center, which is underneath NAU. And with that, I was the Network to Transform Teaching director, and also helped them with their national board certificate. I know, right? How can I refuse that job? That's a great title.
Yeah.
But I did that for a year, and was trying to balance doing different speaking engagements and other things on the side, and then decided that I just wanted to venture off and start my own company in 2016.
Now, talk to us a little bit about TeachLikeTED. Like, what is TeachLikeTED?
Yeah, so, okay, I mentioned before about working with the Ed Rising group, training state officers. One of the things that we would do is look at TED Talks and dissect them. What made them effective? Looking at TED Talks with the volume off and watching their body language, and really deciding whether they were effective or not just by looking at their body language. And did a presentation called Teach Like TED, and was talking about how to incorporate the different elements of an effective TED Talk. So the storytelling, the humor, the moving through different modalities that you kind of take your audience on an emotional roller coaster throughout your talk. And I did the presentation, and then it was something that people asked me to do it for a different organization. So it started rolling. And I talked to an attorney before I started the company, and decided to call the company Teach Like TED. And I said, do you think there's any conflict? Is this going to be a conflict with TED Talks? And he said, well, they're a little loosey-goosey with their guidelines, and it would probably take them a while for you to get their attention. And the only thing that they could do really is give you a cease and desist. I think that's what it's called. And within the first year, I got that email from TED Talks. And I was so excited at first. I'm like, yes, I got their attention. And then I'm like, oh no. and so I asked them if we could jump on a call and I could show them the presentation. And we talked, and they said, yes, you can keep doing it, but you can't get paid for it. So it's still the legal name of my company. And what I'll do is tell organizations, I'll do your keynote, and then I'll throw this in complimentary if you'd like for me to do this. And sometimes I have people say, oh, but I want that to be the keynote. And I'm like, okay, then I'm charging you for the workshop, and the keynote's free.
Yeah.
So, it's something that I think it's a message that is timeless, because how we connect with other people is something that's just part of being human. And so that's still there. At some point, the name of my company will change, or my email address even will change. But for now, it's still, Rachael Mann Consulting, or Teach Like TED, doing business as Rachael Mann Consulting.
That's a great story there. So cool that, within the first year you got their attention. You're like, I'm doing it right.
I love your celebratory moment, but then the immediate terror of like what that means.
Exactly.
Now, as you watch these TED Talks on silent, like how accurate were you guys as you like kind of broke down these TED Talks in terms of like their success and everything that they did?
Oh, for the most part, I think that we were pretty right on. And it really shows the importance of how your facial expressions, your body language, all of those different elements play into delivering a powerful message to your audience.
Now, what is your favorite TED Talk?
Yeah, I was wondering the same.
Oh, good. There's so many, but I would say Tim Urban, who he has a blog called Wait But Why, and he does a talk on procrastination that is fantastic. It's one that I never get tired of. I had a college professor he was a research professor, and they gave him his own freshman class, and he came to me and he said, Rachael, this class is awful. The kids hate it. This isn't what I do. I'm a research professor. And he wanted to know some things that he could do with his freshman class to help engage them. And one of the things that I gave him was that talk, and then also Adam Grant's talk on the surprising habits of original thinkers. And he said that at the survey at the end of the year where they had to say what their favorite classes were, it was those two classes where he showed them his TED Talks, but both have powerful messages, but just such fantastic delivery.
Now, how many TED Talks do you think you've watched over the years?
Oh, one of my New Year's resolutions a couple of years ago was to watch a TED Talk a day. And I found that my problem wasn't watching a TED Talk a day. It was stopping at just one, because you just start like, oh, wait, here's another one in the playlist. I want to watch this too. So for that year alone, it was 365, but I've watched many more since then.
So have you ever been to a live recording of a TED Talk?
And not to the main event. It's actually pretty expensive to go to the main event in Vancouver. But I have been to TEDx events and actually spoke at the Grand Canyon TEDx event a couple of years ago.
That was amazing.
Now, what was that experience like, kind of leading up to it? Like, is it like, do you have a teleprompter? Is it like you just know your speech by heart?
Oh, you do not have a teleprompter. And it is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Delivering an hour-long keynote is so much easier than an 18-minute talk that there's that extra pressure of being on that red circle and knowing that it's a TEDx event. That was definitely my hardest talk that I've ever delivered, even over my very first keynote, which was so stressful. But yeah, that was a tough experience. And yes, you have to have your timing down exactly. You have it memorized to where, as you're driving somewhere, you're saying the talk out loud while you're cooking, you're giving your TED Talk. I'm sure my husband was glad when he could stop hearing me in the background rambling off my talk.
Like how have these skills that you're teaching other people to use, and it's kind of like your life mantra, how has it impacted you as a person, like how you live your day to day and interact? Because this seems like a total mental shift and kind of like a way to live a life, not just just not a career thing.
Well, it's one of the things that's impacted me is actually watching how someone reacts to a story and determining whether or not that's going to be a part of an upcoming talk. You realize that there's so many stories that can actually be a part of a talk and have an impact on your audience. So I think that's part of it. But really, when people come back to you and tell you a year later something that they did that was from a presentation, that they saw you deliver the presentation, that's huge. I had a dentist who was at it was a best practices conference through NCLA, and he was there just as a board member. And he attended my TeachLikeTED presentation, and he came back to me the next year at that conference and told me how he went back and implemented different pieces of my presentation within his business, within his practice. That had not even occurred to me, of using those pieces to start telling stories to your clients while you're working on their teeth, or incorporating humor in your office. So that was exciting. And then I had another one where the gal, because I change my presentation all the time, and she was taking notes, and she literally says in front of everyone, she's like, "Wait, that's not the commandment you used last time." And at another point, she was like, "Wait, you have to tell this story." And she wanted me to tell this story. And I'm like, oh, I'm so excited about how excited she is.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Now, talk to us a little bit about the books. You have 2 books, and how did those all come about? And when did you find time to write these books?
Yeah.
Oof, there's been a couple of years where I haven't had much sleep. The Martians in your classroom started from reading a magazine on a Southwest flight, and there was an interview with Stephen Sanford, who at the time was a director at NASA, and he'd written a book called The Gravity Well. And he talked a little bit about in the article about students and their role in us someday getting to Mars, and how we need to revamp the education system. And I took a quote from that article and I put it on a word swag little image, and then I tagged him. When the flight landed, we had internet again. There wasn't internet on that flight, which is why I was reading a magazine. And I tagged him in the post, and he retweeted it. And then he sent me a friend request, and I sent him a message through LinkedIn and asked him if I could interview him for an article, to write an article for I.c.C.'s Techniques magazine. And I was going to be in DC for a STEM conference anyway. And he said, well, yeah, sure. So we met in person. And at the end of the interview, he said, hey, by the way, I would like for you to write my next book with me. And I told him, I said, oh, you have the wrong person. And he said, no, I've been following your work through online, and you're the right person for this, which, for one, that shows the importance of your online presence, that's how that happened. But also just to say yes to opportunities. That was another big takeaway from that. I almost said no to a very big opportunity, and I was glad that I said yes to it, and went to EdTech team and asked them if they would be willing to publish it, which they were very excited about, adding a STEM book to their collection. And the whole idea of the Martians in your classroom is that the first person to step foot on Mars has most likely been born and could be a student in your classroom. But not only that, the world that they're growing up in, especially now, is so different than the world that I grew up in, and probably you grew up in, that it really could be a different planet. That's just the way that they interact with other people is different. Just the level of technology is so different.
Yeah.
Now, what was that process like? What was the process from beginning to end?
Well, they wanted it released for an I.c.C conference in Chicago in 2018. They wanted that to be the release time and do a launch party. And so in order to do that, I went to EdTech team in October to talk to them about writing this book. And they said that they needed it by January in order to have it published in time. So I was writing sometimes 12 hours a day. I was dreaming about space and about STEM and sometimes waking up and writing down those ideas. But I actually wrote a lot of it on my cell phone using my thumb. Like I would be on a treadmill at the gym writing in my notes app.
That is impressive. That is impressive.
And it was also, it shows how much our world's changed. The fact that I met Stephen in person once, and then we wrote a book together virtually using shared docs, and then it was published. We didn't see each other again until we were at a conference after it had been released, and the organizers had purchased a copy for all their attendees. And so we did a book signing together. I did the keynote for the event, but it was just so wild to think about this idea that we can do so much in this virtual world.
That is an amazing story. Like, that is an amazing story. And I love the attitude of just saying yes, like embracing, even though you can't see, where that leads you, but just allowing yourself to go down that journey and do the process, like the opportunities that afforded you, and how many people, we don't even know the ripple effect of what you created and how many people that will impact, in your lifetime and beyond. It's pretty incredible.
I love that. Now, what was before COVID, what was your travel schedule like? You're talking about like you love being at home. You love the people connection. Tell us a little bit about your travel schedule.
It was a lot of travel. I was sometimes would be in multiple cities within the same week.
Wow.
And I was working on cutting back some, but for the most part, it was almost every week being in a different city somewhere, and sometimes waking up in the morning trying to remember where I'm at.
You're like that rock star. You're like, hello, Detroit. They're like, Detroit was last night.
I never got to that point, but
it'll be great though.
I was definitely earning
still time.
Some miles.
So when this happened, and you had to shift, what were you shook by it, or did you immediately feel like, okay, this is just how was the transition of that to go from that kind of a schedule, from that kind of a mindset, that was what you were doing all the time? What did that feel like? Were you, because I think it rocked a lot of people, and I know we're adaptable, but what did that look like for you?
Well, I had watched everything unfold in China because my sister was teaching in China, and she was sending me video clips of these buildings closed down and these empty streets. And she had moved to a virtual environment with her school. And so I saw all of this happening. She was able to get to the Philippines literally 4 hours before the Philippines closed the borders to anyone coming from China. And so, I watched this, but yet I didn't feel like it could happen to us, which just shows our ego as Americans. It's like, oh, wow, this is really rocking some other countries, but just, I couldn't see that was going to happen here. And I remember being in Salem, Oregon for a keynote that I was doing there for an organization, March 10th and 11th. And my husband didn't want me to go. He's a doctor. And he was just like, yeah, I think you should cancel this. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm not canceling anything. And right before the keynote on March 11th, I had an email that I saw where someone was canceling an event. And then when I finished the keynote, I got a phone call, someone else canceling an event. And it was just within a matter of 2 days, seeing like the next few months being canceled. And there was a sense of almost, I guess, shock, but at the same time of, we've got to take care of this. This is something this is serious. And it was also, to be honest, a time for me to take care of my health. I took the quarantine piece very seriously, and I was getting more sleep, exercising, making my own meals, and eating healthy. And so there were some positive outcomes on that side of it. But it really helped me to kind of think through some of my priorities too, moving forward. Do I want to say yes to everything, or be a little bit more selective to make sure that I am taking care of my health and taking care of things? But, it was also, I was very fortunate to be able to, NCLA had asked me to start doing some member engagement activities for their members. And the timing worked out well because I started doing podcasts and webinars for them. And, just some of these virtual events as well, which are, it's a shift, but it's also exciting to be able to see how we can do this, how we can make it work.
That's so cool.
Wow. Now, as we go back, to travel, people getting back together, like, do you see yourself kind of taking a lighter kind of like a travel schedule, or are you just like ready to get back out on the beat and meet as many people as possible and inspire all those people as you kind of get back out there?
Well, according to research from some of the big organizations for public speaking, it may be a while before things get back to a normal schedule because of the budgets being impacted. So one of the easy things to cut is that those in-person conferences, but also people's comfort level. They've done surveys to see when people feel like they'll be comfortable in those in-person events. As soon as someone asks me to do something in person, I'm there. So, I may not be shaking hands or hugging. I'll still be doing social distancing as long as we need to. But as soon as the opportunity comes, I'll be back doing them again. But I think that it probably will be a slow process for folks getting back into conferences. And I think that too, a lot of organizations are seeing the possibilities of doing some hybrid models and offering things in different ways in the future moving forward.
It's such a cool thing of like where people can connect from everywhere, or like just have it downloaded and, click on a button. It's like you pay this registration fee, you have that here, and you can get so much more and, pick and choose. And a lot of times we go to conferences and we'll try to divide and conquer. Mm-hmm. And we're like, oh, this one was like so great. And we're like, we missed these two because like, our schedules didn't work for that. And there's just so much good from all this, but then there's just so much, that has changed. Yeah. Now you talked about eating healthier and working out more during COVID. What's next? What do you have next on your agenda? Like where do you see this next chapter going?
Well, so last year I had a children's book published, The Spaces You'll Go, and that's something that I want to see turn into a series. So I think that continuing to write some of these children's books, and that was an interesting process because when I first took it to publishers, I had 4 publishers say no. They said that there's so many children's books out there, they don't sell. And then I found a publisher who was excited about it, and I.c.C wanted to have it as part of their conference for the book launch. So it turned out to be a very positive thing. So I want to create a series where it's all career related, getting kids excited about STEM related careers in the future. So the next one will be The Things You'll Grow. And then another one on the things you'll code, and just just looking at the future, how these different careers are going to look different in the future, and getting kids excited through the characters of Cass and Kinga Blue. And then I also have a book that's being released next week through ACTE. It's called Your Competition Companion, and it's for high school students, middle school, high school, and post-secondary who are in career and technical student organizations such as HOSA or DECA, FBLA, that are competing in events. and helping them with their professional skills and even the hands-on portion, setting them up for success.
That's so cool.
Wow, that's so awesome. I mean, you're ready. You're
Yeah.
ready. You're just taking life by the horns. I love it. Now, we read about a student that, won the Arizona speech competition and then went to the national competition. Did that happen, like where you went to Nebraska and to support the student, or was that something that got swept away by COVID?
Oh, so that's Lennon Audrain, and he is still such a rock star student. We communicate all the time. He sent me a message the other day wanting some information on Perkins because he's working on his doctoral program right now, but he's still doing great things. And he was on one of our webinars recently for NCLA, sharing the student perspective and teacher perspective. So no, nothing is going to stop him.
Yeah. No, that is so cool. Now, what are some of your favorite moments that you miss about being in the classroom? You talk so much about those relationships. What do you miss the most?
And I've had a few moments lately of just really considering possibly going back to teach again.
Oh, wow.
I had a student who
it could be a seed.
I had a student who he was in my program for 4 years, and we stayed in touch for years, and he passed away this year. And it was just that moment of just the memories of the different events that we did, and just that you carry, they're like your children, and that as teachers. So those relationship pieces are what I miss the most about teaching. And two, when I discover something new, and like virtual reality, I've really been into virtual reality lately. And last night, my nephew, who's 19, he was over for dinner, and so I'm like, "Oh, hey, have you tried Oculus Quest?" And teaching him how to use it, and watching how quickly he picked up on it. Those are just things that are priceless. That really make being an educator, being a teacher, worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree.
Wow. I love it. I love these seeds that we're planting. I love all these things are moving, like with the books, you have this yes attitude. I love that one time you're just like, no more. I'm not going to be afraid to get up there and speak. And we also read about your 10 principles. Can you talk about some of your favorite principles that you kind of teach as you kind of go through, to get, the public speaking engagement side of everything?
Yeah, stories, I mentioned stories before, and I think that stories are powerful. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that they have a story or what that story is. So I think that helping people find their stories and recognize the impact that they can make on other people. The humor is huge. Like if you're able to make someone laugh and connect with them, that's something that you don't laugh with someone that you don't like. So that also creates that relationship of wanting to learn from someone that you like. And I always say that students will go to the moon and back for a teacher that they like. And it's the same thing within a leadership, like with a workplace. I've stayed at jobs for longer than I probably should, because that boss meant so much to me, and I didn't want to disappoint that boss. So yeah, I think that all of the principles are powerful principles. One of them all of them are backed by brain research too. Like if you look at John Medina's brain rules, everything that is in an element of an effective TED Talk is backed by brain research. John Medina, he talks about if you're doing a talk that is a lecture, that even if you're not using active participation strategies because you're not able to for some reason, you can still switch between different modes because your brain gets tired. If you're just telling stories, your brain gets tired, or if you're just using statistics, your brain gets tired. So being able to move between some data to the humor, to something a little bit more emotional, to the storytelling, that's something that's going to help to create a more effective presentation as well.
I love that.
Come Tuesday, I think I'm just going to do all my Zooms on silence and have the students kind of engage my lesson and how engaging it was,
love this plan. I think that'd be so cool.
I want to know what they learned, how much they would freak out. They're like, what's going on? I can't hear them.
I may have to show up to these Zooms. I'm super excited. I think that would be
And I'm going to tap into all 10 principles. I'm going to be moving back and forth. I'm going to be throwing data at them. They're just going to be like, does he know we can't hear him? And I'm just going to try to be as engaging as possible and turn my Zoom lessons into my own very own mini TED Talk.
Sometimes Zooms have gone wrong for me where I don't realize the kids can't hear me. So this could, apparently I was doing that like ahead of the curve with that.
Nailed it.
Yeah, nailed it. That's right.
Well, and it does, with wearing masks, I realize how much our facial expressions and even reading I didn't realize how much I pay attention to reading someone's lips as they're talking. And you'll see people in stores like pull their mask down to talk to you. You're like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or sticking their heads around the shield and so they can hear you. And then like I have a loud voice anyways, but I'm like bagel, plain bagel with cream cheese. Like they're like, why is this guy yelling at me?
He's pantomiming.
Yeah.
But I mean,
pointing like that's an aggressive point.
But the thing is when we keep talking about, getting back into the classroom and all of that, I like the engagement. I don't have to wear a mask when I'm talking to my kids. And so I can see their faces and we can see expressions and all of that. And so while engagement is a challenge virtually, there's things that you can do that once we go back, we're going to have to adjust for in person, and that's one of the things, we're going to be behind masks and still having that, connection and conveying those moments. I think is going to be something we'll have to be so mindful of,
And I was on a Zoom meeting, I guess it was about a week ago, and one of the directors from I.C.C. who was on the meeting, he had done the update on Zoom, which I still haven't done, but now there's these filters that you can use. So here we are in this very professional meeting, and all of a sudden he has on like a pair of those glasses that you wear in 3D movies.
Yeah.
We all just start laughing, and I love that. And I thought, if I were teaching virtually right now, I would just have a moment where everyone is picking out their favorite filter and just adding some laughter into that space.
I love that.
That's what we need. The world needs more laughter.
I agree.
Well, Rachael, thank you so much for taking some time out. It was so fun to sit down and pick your brain and hear what you've done and what you're going to do just next week. It's so exciting, and we know there's going to be big things to come from you in the future here. So thank you very much.
If you could give any advice to educators right now just to be more effective based on the things that you feel strongly about, what is one thing that you would want to share?
I would say don't take yourself too seriously. I think that right now during this time that I hear a lot of educators just becoming very overwhelmed or beating themselves up, feeling as if maybe the kids aren't engaged. And I think that right now we have to give ourselves and each other a lot of grace. And that's important. It's a stressful time, and beating yourself up is not going to help anyone, especially not your students. So I think that can go a long way right now.
I think that's great advice.
I think beating yourself up never bodes well for anybody.
No, I agree.
As we always say, people, if you can be anything in the world, be kind. Now, if you loved hearing stories from Rachael Mann about the power of saying yes, calling in sick just to avoid a speak in front of your peers, a potential lawsuit from TED Talks for her company, TeachLikeTED, the power of your social media presence. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Every Tuesday, the latest episode of the Nailed It Wall will be downloaded to your phone. And Rachael talked about the power of social media. We're on Twitter. If you love pictures, videos of our life story, our podcast, make sure you follow me at Mr. Lane the STEM Guy.
And me at A Positive Proton.
And Rachael, plug all your social media.
Rachael EDU, RACHAEL EDU, and that's across the board. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm not on TikTok. Well, sort of I am, but I don't.
All right, we need you to step up your TikTok game. We just filmed announcements for TikTok Tuesday. We could get a TikTok from her.
It's gonna be TED Talk TikTok.
TED Talk. Yeah. You could get the dual lawsuit there.
Well, we thank you, Rachael.